So I want to welcome everybody tonight to our SALT Talks. My name is Patty Schramm. I'm the Parent Resource Coordinator for the SALT Talks session. Tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about exploring another transition-related topic. It's supported decision-making. When we're going through transition, as many of you are experiencing now, or you're looking forward to planning to it, wherever you're at, the transition from school to adulthood comes with many, many decisions and a lot of paperwork. So this is just another piece of that whole transition part. So we want to make sure parents know what information is out there and to make the best decisions they can. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers tonight. We have two speakers. We have Courtney Hineman. She's with Butler County, and she's an outreach coordinator advocate. And we have Josh Young, who's with ONI, and I'll let them take over from there. And I think I made you, I'll make sure I made you co-host. Yes, so you can share your screen, Josh. I'll go ahead and let you take it from here.
You're muted.
There you go. You can hear me now?
Yep.
Good. I'm going to use a slightly different display on my end, so just give me a second while I get that set up. And then we're going to transition between screens a couple times, so just bear with us when that happens. All right. All right, can you see the screen? It says another way. I can't see any of you, so if you're shaking your heads, okay.
Yes, we can see it.
All right, so first of all, just good evening, and thank you for taking some time to kind of give us your attention on what we think is a really important subject. But we like to just kind of jump in and skip the formalities because we know our time is limited, and the topic, like I said, is really important and really far-reaching. So what you're going to get today is an abbreviated version. We are going to try to distill this stuff down to basic concepts, and we're going to go quickly. But we try to hit you with some pretty impactful stuff, and we hope that by the end, you'll just kind of think, we should probably know a little bit more about that. And then if and when you do want to know more, we have a lot of other resources, videos, guides, all kinds of things we can support you with. So just know that that is out there. And finally, before we jump in, I want you to know that this is really a great opportunity to kind of get ahead of the curve. So what we are talking about today is part of a bigger movement that's coming. It's actually worldwide. So this is one of those things that we can either kind of see coming and get behind now and kind of become leaders in the movement, or we can put it off and wait until it hits and then kind of scramble to figure out how to do it, which we know in our field is sometimes common practice. But we do encourage you to kind of look at this as a really great opportunity to get started with something really important. All right, Courtney, you're up.
All right. So let's start with the life trajectory. It's basically a tool that helps us do some backwards planning. It helps us talk about what we want to happen in our own life or the life of someone we care about, and then figure out how we get there, what steps we need to take. So let me ask all of you, what do you want your son's or daughter's life to look like as adults? What are some goals? What kind of lives are you trying to help them have ultimately?
So this is audience participation time. Feel free to unmute yourself and let us know, or put it in a chat, and maybe Patty, you can share. How would you describe a good life for your son or daughter as they are adults? What's it look like? What do they have? Looks like we've got maybe safety, independence, friends, a friend, partner, financial stability, health, happiness, success, doing something that makes them happy. Yeah, all kinds of things, right? So you mentioned a lot of great stuff. Go ahead, Courtney.
Right. So a lot of people in the chat said to be happy, to be healthy, to have friends, to be independent, and these are all pretty common. And we want all these wonderful things for the people we care about or want to help.
So the other way that we use this tool is to help people identify the things that we don't want to have happen in their life. So the things that we want to help them avoid. So again, audience participation, what kinds of things come to mind for you when you think about your son, daughter, or loved one, the things that might make you cringe or just sad if their life was like this later on? So what do you think? And again, chat or feel free to unmute yourself, whatever works. Being taken advantage of, being used by someone. Yeah. Issues with safety, being unsafe. Being sad, not being happy, having no friends, no sort of stable home, being vulnerable, no security. Yeah, these are all very, very common things that we hear from people, right? So that makes up the bottom of this life trajectory, the things that we want to avoid for our loved ones. And of course, there's more that we could talk about. And sometimes it's actually easier to talk about what we're afraid of or what we don't want. But I think these are resonating with most people. So now we've got a picture of the things that we want for the future and the things that we don't. So how do we get to the things we want and avoid the things that we don't? Well, we're going to watch a short video, and it's going to give away the punchline of our presentation today, but we want to get to the point so that you all have as clear an understanding of what we're talking about as possible by the time that we're done. So in order to get to that, I do have to stop and then reshare. All right. Maybe.
When you do a share, are you clicking on those two boxes regarding a video? When it says new screen and then two boxes at the bottom left?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I just need to find how I can get out of my PowerPoint here. We'll do it that way. Thanks for bearing with me while we get this up. All right, so if this does not play with sound, please let me know.
Hey, parents and family members. Today, we want to talk to you because we know that you want the very best for your son or daughter or loved one, and that you want to do your best to help them live a good life. We also know that you can have a lot of questions about how things work or what your options are, especially as your loved one gets older and closer to becoming an adult. And one of those questions is what to do when your child turns 18, because chances are you still want to be involved in their life, help them make decisions, and make sure they aren't taken advantage of. Now, you might have heard from a lot of other people that guardianship is the answer, but guardianship is really meant to be a last resort, something that's used when other less restrictive options aren't available. See, guardianship is actually the removal of a person's right to make decisions about their life. And while guardianship might seem like the protective thing to do, it can have a profound and lasting impact on a person. In fact, there are studies that say that people without guardians are more likely to live independently, be included in their communities, and have their rights respected. So if guardianship isn't always the best way, then what else is there? Well, there are actually a lot of other less restrictive options. In fact, too many to explore in this short video. They just haven't been talked about a lot, which is what we're trying to change. Now, all of this is part of a movement towards supported decision-making, which is all about helping people learn and practice decision-making skills so they have more choice and control in their lives. Because it turns out People are happier and more successful that way. We want you to know that you have options that might be better for helping your loved one live a good life. So before you make a decision about guardianship, take some time to explore less restrictive options. We'll be glad to help you.
All right, so while I transition back to the presentation, I just want to make sure that we're also saying to all of you that if you are guardian of your loved one, we are certainly not saying that you have done anything wrong. We are only saying that for a lot of people, we have learned that they just didn't actually know what their options were. And so our job here is just to help you understand what other options are available and kind of understand what guardianship actually is and what it's intended to do and what else is out there. So, all right, so we're going to revisit a couple of those things that the video talked about in a minute, but what should we know before we move forward? Well, first, guardianship is the legal removal of a person's right to make decisions about their life. And second, because of the very serious nature of this, guardianship is intended to be the last resort after other less restrictive options have been tried. So you should also know that once guardianship is established, it can be really difficult to reverse. Not impossible, but it doesn't happen often. In fact, most of the time, guardianship ends when the person under guardianship dies. So if you think about that for a minute, we make a judgment about a person, often very early on in their life when they're very young, and it very literally sticks with them for the rest of their life. So other important things we know, and a lot of this comes from the National Core Indicators, which is a national survey that is conducted for people who receive services in this field. Courtney?
We know that people with more self-determination have more control over their lives, have better life outcomes. They live more independently, have more financial independence, and have better jobs that pay more. And all of that sounds good, but there's more. People with more self-determination are more likely to be included in their communities, spend time with friends, go on dates, have more privacy, and be able to practice their religion. They're also more likely to have their rights restricted. And then the most surprising one, people with more self-determination are better able to identify and resist abuse and exploitation. Yeah, so that's pretty big.
And then we also know some things about people who don't get to make their own decisions or who have less self-determination, like they might not develop decision-making skills. They also might not be included in decisions that affect them as they get older. So think about that, medical decisions, living arrangements, even things as basic as food and clothing. And over time, people who don't get to make their own decisions can become passive and develop low self-esteem, which can affect their physical and mental well-being. So why do we go to guardianship so often? And it's actually increasing across the country. But why do we think it's the answer? Go ahead, what do you think in the chat? Or again, unmute yourself. Why do you think we so often use guardianship? Fear, yeah. This is what others have told you is the way, yeah. Fear. It's all people know. Yeah, so we're seeing the same two themes over and over again, right? Good. All right, Courtney, you're up.
Great. We often have some misconceptions about guardianship that lead us there. Things like parents have to get guardianship for their son or daughter when they turn 18. This is not true. There are many other things we should be trying before guardianship, even at age 18. And this one's big, because a recent study revealed that there's a pipeline between the schools and guardianship. Parents are told or encouraged to get guardianship, but are rarely, if ever, given information about all of the other less restrictive options or about the real limits of guardianship. So part of our project is trying to get this information to schools and parents so they know about this stuff. Another misconception is if I don't have guardianship, I won't be involved or know what's going on. Also not true, and this one's easy. All kinds of releases of information can be used to grant access to important information from schools, medical providers, banks, you name it. But let's look at the biggest misconception people have about guardianship.
And that is that guardianship is going to protect the person from harm, from getting arrested, from abuse, from neglect, from exploitation. But do you know that there's actually no study that says that people under guardianship are safer than those who are not? And we don't have time tonight to get into all the statistics, but this belief that many of us have about guardianship just isn't true. I was talking to a group a while ago, people from probate court, children's services, and the mental health board, and they all expressed some frustration that so many people think guardianship means that we can force someone to do something or keep them from doing something. And it doesn't, pretty plain and simple. Guardianship doesn't allow you to force someone to take their medication or force them to attend their medical appointments, or in reality, keep someone from going somewhere or doing what they want to do. Yes, it does allow you to take some legal action on their behalf after those things happen, but that's kind of the extent of it. And you don't need guardianship to be able to do that. So a quick story from my personal experience. I worked for a county board for about 12 years. And at one point I had someone on my caseload who did have a legal guardian. We had a meeting with him and his guardian and his other team members. And as soon as we got started, this person said, "I want to donate my plasma." And the guardian looked at him and rolled her eyes and said, "You are not donating your plasma. There's no reason for you to donate your plasma." So she kind of dismissed it and tried to move the meeting along. Well, he was pretty adamant about it. So he kept bringing it up during the meeting and she kept kind of ignoring it and dismissing it. When the meeting ended, the guardian got in her car and she drove away. And this guy walked out of his apartment and he walked down the street and he donated his plasma. There's really nothing the guardian could do about that. Sure, she said in the meeting, "You're not donating your plasma, you don't need to do that," but she couldn't actually stop him from doing it. Now, should the medical place where he donated his plasma have asked if he had a guardian? I mean, I guess. There was nothing really about this person that would lead you to believe he had a guardian just by initially interacting with him or looking at him. And doctors don't always ask if a person has a guardian. So again, there are some real limitations to guardianship. But what else should we know about this? Well, remember what Courtney told you earlier. People with more self-determination are actually better able to identify and resist abuse and exploitation. And maybe that's because they have more practice making their own decisions, drawing their own boundaries, and standing up for themselves. So guardianship doesn't actually do what we think it does much of the time. It isn't even intended to. It has a very specific purpose. But if it's the only option that we know about, then it's the only option we're going to promote or pursue, right? Now, sometimes guardianship is the right thing to do. Some people, even with support, are unable to understand information and make decisions. Or there is an immediate and short-term health or safety risk that calls for someone to step in. It's just that we've used guardianship in a pretty heavy-handed way, applying it to all kinds of situations, and it's often not the right tool for the situation at hand. It can be a bit like using a sledgehammer to hang a picture on the wall. You're going to end up doing more damage than good, right?
Here's another analogy that might help, or that you might find helpful in talking with others about guardianship. Anyone knows someone who thinks duct tape can fix everything, no matter what the issue? Get the duct tape. Chairway is wobbly and needs a little support? Duct tape. Leaky pipe? Duct tape. Cut your finger with a knife? Duct tape. Yeah, listen, it's convenient. It might even seem like it's working at first, but it's not the right tool for the job. It's not a good long-term solution. It's also not very person-centered, right? Responding the same way all the time without considering what the person or situation actually needs. This doesn't mean that duct tape, or in this case guardianship, isn't good for anything, only that it has a pretty specific purpose. And when we try to use it outside of its intended purpose, it doesn't hold up so well. So when it comes to guardianship, ask yourself, are we giving this the duct tape treatment when there are actually better tools available? Are we using the right tool for the right job? Because there's really a versatile set of tools out there, and the more tools you have access to and knowledge of, the better you're going to be able to help people. Because what works for one person or situation isn't necessarily going to work for another. So build your skill set, learn how to use the tools, practice.
Okay, great. So guardianship should be the last resort, and we should explore less restrictive options, the other tools that are out there. But we got that. But what are those less restrictive options, those other tools? How else can people learn and practice decision-making skills? Now, you may have seen or heard of some of these things before, and this is not going to be an exhaustive list, and we're not going to do a deep dive on them because of time. This is more of a review, but these are just some of the options. So first, a payee. A payee is a person or an agency that is assigned to manage someone else's benefit money, so like Social Security money. They make sure that the important bills and expenses get paid, and that a person has access to money that's left over for other things they want or need in their life. Now, a good payee can also help a person understand their budget and involve them in the decision-making so they can learn that skill.
A trust fund is a way to keep larger amounts of money without it affecting a person's eligibility for benefits like Medicaid or a waiver. They can be set up in different ways, and money can be saved and then distributed for certain things, ensuring that person has access to what they need without having to take full responsibility for managing all that money.
A power of attorney, sometimes called a POA, is an arrangement where someone gives decision-making authority for certain things to someone else who they trust. Now, that person who's giving the authority to someone else, they have to understand what they're doing at the time, but they can decide the scope of the authority they give to someone else. So what kinds of things that other person can and can't make decisions about. And they can change their mind later on if they want to. They can decide that they want someone else to make those decisions, or they don't want someone to have that authority anymore. As long as when they make those changes, they're still able to understand what they're doing. But you can have a power of attorney for things like healthcare or financial decisions. So for example, maybe your son or daughter wants to help to make decisions about their medical treatment. Well, they can appoint you as their power of attorney, and you then have the authority to make medical decisions for them according to whatever that agreement is. Maybe that's just for things like surgeries, or if something like an accident happens and they need someone else to communicate with a doctor and make decisions. Or in terms of finances, maybe they want you to make financial decisions anytime it has to do with, say, a contract. Well, you can both agree to that and document that in a power of attorney.
Supported decision-making is a worldwide movement that has gained a lot of momentum lately. The whole idea is that we all need some help to make some decisions sometimes, to understand information better before we decide. So this is all about doing the exact same thing for people who happen to have disabilities. Finding people to help them understand information so that they can make and learn from their own decisions instead of just taking that right away. In Ohio, a person can designate a chosen representative to make decisions about DD services for them. Again, this is voluntary. Both parties have to agree. But there's an acknowledgement form they sign. Again, this would only be for the services a person receives in the DD system, not for other kinds of decisions.
So then there's a conservator. And the more that I've learned about this option, the more it seems like something we should do more often. So conservatorship is like voluntary guardianship. A person can approach probate court and say, you know, I want someone else to help make certain decisions for me. Here is someone that I trust to do that. Probate court, can you approve and oversee that arrangement? And then the rules of guardianship can apply to that situation. But the person retains their right to modify it. They can change the person who makes decisions for them. They can change the kinds of decisions that person makes. They can end the agreement at a later date. So it's the person who wants help to make decisions initiating it, not some outside party forcing a judgment on them. So it's kind of like power of attorney, except it can apply to all kinds of situations, not just medical and financial. And you're asking the court to be involved in it. And one other quick note, different states in the country, they use different terms for things. So in Ohio, guardianship and conservatorship are two different things. But in some other states, they use the term conservator to mean guardian. So if you have followed any of the stuff that's been going on with Britney Spears, her dad was her conservator, which in California means the same thing as guardian in Ohio. So just know that in Ohio, guardianship and conservatorship are two different things.
Technology options are so vast nowadays. From in-home assistants like Alexa to various apps to help us get around, or video chat and check in from our home, or devices that remind us to take our medication. I was in a webinar a while ago about alternative and augmentative communication, and we talked about so many different things to help people communicate. And in some cases, without these things, we might think a person doesn't understand what's being talked about or doesn't have anything to say about it. But with it, they're able to express themselves and have more control over their lives. It was a really amazing presentation led by two young guys with autism. So we're really selling people short when we don't think about how technology might help them. For example, I'm going to have a little med reminder and also remote support just to check in on me and make sure I'm okay, and to have the med reminder to make sure I take my medication.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff out there to just help us remember to do important things or make sure that we're okay. And then something as simple as a release of information. We mentioned it before, but it allows important information to be shared with you or someone else so that you can stay informed and help your loved one understand information and make decisions if necessary. So that misconception we mentioned earlier about parents not being able to get important information about their loved ones once they're adults, well, a release of information can be signed so that doctors can share diagnoses, treatments, medical summaries, etc., with you. And like Courtney said earlier, you can create a release of information for many different situations like school, work, banking, it just goes on and on. So there are definitely more options than these that we just talked about, but you can see that before we start talking about something like guardianship, which is the removal of a person's right, well, we've got some other exploring to do, right? So the nice thing about most of these options is that they can be used together. So for example, someone can use a payee for help with money, and then supported decision-making for help with decisions about maybe housing, where to live, and then technology as a way to check in with people or remember to take care of important things every day. Almost any combination of these options that works for a person can be used. But a lot of this still has to do with the idea that people with disabilities have the right to make their own decisions instead of having someone else make them on their behalf, even if it means they need a little help to do that. So let's revisit that for a minute, because that's what this whole movement of supported decision-making is about.
Okay, so what is it? What is supported decision-making and how do we explain it?
Well, here is a pretty common explanation of it. First of all, it is not one size fits all. There are as many ways to do supported decision-making as there are people who can use it. So it's going to look different for everyone in different situations. But in general, it happens when people choose trusted others. So yes, friends, family, neighbors, people from their church, professionals that they work with, to help them understand information and what their choices are so they can make their own decisions. So really, this is basically people asking for help from others to make decisions when they need it. And I know that that seems simple, But because of the way the system has kind of treated people with disabilities for decades, this is kind of a radical idea. Because when you ask for help to make decisions, maybe buying a new car or changing jobs, medical stuff, relationship stuff even, well, you're often seen as wise or mature or responsible, right, for considering your options and asking for help. When someone with a disability needs help to make decisions, it's often seen as a vulnerability, something that we need to protect them from. Just because someone needs help to make some decisions, and we all do sometimes, doesn't mean that their right to make those or other decisions should be taken away. So supported decision-making is about respecting a person's right to make decisions and supporting them to do so in creative ways, in person-centered ways, in whatever way they need. And if you want more legitimacy for practicing supported decision-making, think about it this way. It is really a part of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, those reasonable accommodations that people are entitled to. These just happen to be accommodations to make their own decisions.
One of the other analogies we found to be pretty helpful was the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Remember that show? The basic premise was that the contestant was asked a series of questions which got harder as they went on, kind of like life. What could they do if they weren't sure what to do? If they didn't know the answer? They had lifelines they could use. They could call someone they trusted and ask for help, or they could ask the audience, or they could call someone they trusted, or they could get help to narrow down their options so that they were only choosing between two of them. Well, that's really what supported decision-making is. Helping people identify and use their lifelines. Helping them learn who, when, and how to ask for help when they need it. Those lifelines are important and we all have them. But again, this all starts with the idea that people have the right to make decisions about their lives and that with some help, people can learn decision-making skills. So we really have to buy into that first.
All right, so this is just a simple visual to help us understand what supported decision-making kind of looks like. In the center is the decision maker, the person who is asking for help from their supporters who surround them. Those supporters can help in a variety of ways. Role playing, making pros and cons lists, doing research together, or just explaining things in a way that makes sense to the person or any other way that's helpful to them. What the supporters do not do is make the final decision. That right and that authority remains with the person in the middle, the decision maker. And the person can even create a supported decision-making agreement. It's a form that identifies the people they want to help them with certain decisions, those lifelines. We have samples and examples of all of those too. Those agreement forms, they're not necessary to use supported decision-making, but they're often helpful. And here's the other important thing. We talked a bit about guardianship, but this isn't just for people for whom guardianship is a factor or a consideration in their lives. This is for everyone. Yes, you can and should use supported decision-making even when a guardian is involved. But the things that we're talking about today go way beyond that. This is about just supporting anyone to have more self-determination and live better lives. We know now that the more self-determination people have, the better lives they live. So why wouldn't we use this every chance we get? It should really be the new norm. You're up, Courtney.
Yeah. I have used supported decision-making in my own life. I just never knew what it was called. I just knew there were things sometimes I had a hard time understanding or that I needed to talk out with someone in order to make my decision. For example, most of the time I go to doctors by myself, but if it's a new specialist or doctor, my stepmom will go with me. I normally write down questions I have and will explain what has been going on, but my stepmom will go with me to tell doctor any information I might be missing or might not know. She will also ask questions I didn't even think about asking. She will also take notes, that way if the doctor is explaining things quickly, she can explain to me more slowly so that I can understand better. My stepmom also helped me if I wanted advice on what to say to a friend. For example, there was someone I knew, their best buddies, and their mom actually approached me, asking me if I'd like to be her daughter's roommate. And after talking about it with my parents, I decided that I didn't really know this person very well. I only knew them a little bit through best buddies, but that was it. And so I decided I didn't want to be roommates with them. So I practiced with my stepmom on what I would say to them. My dad made an Excel spreadsheet for my budget. If I go over, it would go red. If I notice in the sheet that I'm going over a category, like if I'm spending over my money in groceries, I will email my dad and we will adjust my budget. He will also help me figure out if I can afford something I would like this more money. For example, he helped me figure out that I could have both Netflix and Disney Plus. I was wanting both, but I didn't know if I could afford it. When I first moved out, I would send my dad my Excel spreadsheet every month, but now I just send it to him if the amount of the bill changes or if I notice myself going over. My coworker Connie has helped me in both work and personal situations. She has helped me figure out my hours so that I'm not going over. Last year, we were supposed to go on a trip to Washington, D.C. together. We didn't get to go because of COVID. Connie helped me get some nice clothes for the trip by just making sure the clothes fit me. Sometimes I have trouble telling whether clothes fit me or not. She also helped me speak up for myself by encouraging me to tell my providers what I need help with. She also encouraged me to connect with neighbors so that they could help me escape in an emergency, and hinted that someone was not trustworthy. That situation, I had help from both Connie and my parents, so that after I told them what Connie said, and since I wasn't comfortable telling the friend in person, I just wrote a letter to them explaining that I wasn't comfortable being their friend anymore because they were older than me. Okay, ready for the last activity? Now, safety is one of those sensitive words or issues, right? It's important to be safe, but it's also important to be happy. But when we prioritize safety above but sometimes we prioritize safety above everything else. This tool, the Happy Safe Grid, is a great way to explore all the options and balance being happy with being safe. Let us tell you about Evan, and then you can help us figure out what Evan's options are for being safe, but also being happy.
All right, so I'm gonna stop this share again because I gotta pull up a whiteboard for us to work on. Give me just a second. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to talk to you about Evan. Again, when I was a county board staff, I had someone on my caseload and we worked to help him accomplish his goals. Well, in this particular case, I worked with this guy for a very long time. So let me tell you a little bit about Evan. Evan is a guy who was very ambitious, liked to try new things. He was also the kind of guy that would go out in public and flash a smile and people would just be attracted to him. He loved to have fun. He loved to joke around. He loved to meet new people. It was just part of his life. He just had this energy. The other thing that you should know about Evan is that Evan used a wheelchair. Evan had a very rare disorder where he would try to hurt himself, and he didn't mean to. It was just part of the disorder. So he chose to have wrist and ankle restraints on his wheelchair, because if he didn't have them, he might try to gouge at his eyes or hit himself. Or, for example, when I would work with him and just push him through a doorway to get from one place to another, right as we approached that door frame, he would throw his arms out so that, you know, they rammed into the door frame. He didn't want to do this. Again, this is just kind of part of his disorder. But at one of his planning meetings, he said to his whole team with his family there, and his dad was guardian, hey, I want to go skydiving. Remember, he's a really ambitious guy. I want to go skydiving. Well, Dad's immediate response was, no way. What are you thinking? You're not going to go skydiving, right? Well, just like the other story that I shared with you, Evan did not let it go. Evan kept bringing it up. Now, this happened over the course of years, not just one meeting, but he kept bringing it up. So this is a tool that we can use to try to capture everyone's ideas, everyone's hopes, but also sometimes everyone's insecurities, and put them all in one place so we can see them, and it can help us make the best decision, or help the person make the best decision once they have all the information to consider. So I'm going to keep this up, and maybe Patty, you can help us, because the chat seems to be the most efficient way here to get some feedback. What I want to hear and what Courtney wants to hear are, what are some things that you could suggest we try with Evan? Since he wants to go skydiving, what are some other things that we could try that maybe help him get that experience, or that we just need to have reflect on here, like, no way, you can't go skydiving. And then I'll show you how this tool works. So what are some other options for him? What are some things that he could try? And Patty, if you can just share them out, I will type them one at a time.
Virtual reality, iFly.
All right, let's start there. Let's do virtual reality. I'm gonna make iFly a little bit different, but virtual reality. So here's how this tool works. How happy or unhappy would virtual reality make Evan? I will weigh in on that part, since I worked with him for a very long time, and then I'll ask you to tell me how safe or unsafe do you think would be. So for Evan, remember, he wants to go skydiving. So it's not going to be way up here, because way up here would be skydiving, jumping out of a plane. But it will give him some of that experience, right? So happy more than unhappy. Now, how safe or unsafe do you think virtual reality would be for Evan? And Patty, if you just want to shout some stuff out, that's fine.
I think virtual would be safer.
Yep, definitely safer, right? Now, the one thing I can tell you about Evan is that sometimes he might experience some motion sickness. So we can't put it all the way over here on the left, because he might get sick. Listen, I get sick from the virtual reality stuff sometimes. So it's going to be safer, but not completely safe. So good. That is virtual reality. Now let's do the iFly. And that, you might have meant something different by iFly than how I'm interpreting it. So I'm going to label it this way. Indoor skydiving, because that's an option we hear all the time. All right, so indoor skydiving for Evan. Let's plot it. Well, it's probably going to make him happier than virtual reality, because he's getting that physical experience, right? He's up here. How safe do we think indoor skydiving is going to be? And Patty, I'm just going to go to you again. Safer than virtual reality? Less safe than virtual reality? What do we think?
I would think it's a little less safer, but that would be my opinion. But I'm pretty sure they have a lot of safety issues. I mean, safety things in place too. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So probably a little less safe than virtual reality, but still primarily on the safe side of things. Great. What other suggestions do we have? Courtney, do you have something?
Yeah, I think in the chat, someone said a small airplane ride or a hot air balloon ride.
Oh, nice. Let's look at that. Let's go with airplane ride. Here's my typing. It always happens when you're typing in front of people. All right, airplane ride. How happy is he going to be? Well, probably happier with an airplane ride than indoor skydiving, right? Because it's closer to what he ultimately wants. All right, Patty or Courtney, how safe or unsafe do you think the airplane ride would be for Evan?
Maybe a little bit on the unsafe, because I mean planes are pretty safe, but I know they have like emergency things and something could happen, so maybe a little bit on the unsafe.
So maybe a little less safe than indoor skydiving. Maybe it straddles this line. And Courtney has had the luxury of doing this presentation with me before, so she knows a little bit about Evan. But the other thing to know about Evan is that if he gets really excited, he has some trouble kind of staying still. And it can get to the point where it escalates and he has trouble breathing. So if he's up in a plane and that happens, it's a little bit harder to help him calm down. You can't really remove him from that situation, right? So airplane, very happy, but probably not as safe as some of the other ones. All right, let's get maybe 2 or 3 more here, and then we'll kind of wrap this up.
There was
What
a,
else we have?
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, someone said in the chat, bungee jump.
Bungee jump. All right, how happy would he be? Let me tell you, Evan he'd be off the charts happy with a bungee jump. Okay, so that's going to be above airplane. How safe or unsafe do you think, Courtney, that is for Evan? If you want help, throw it out there. Use a lifeline. Use Patty as your lifeline.
Yeah, Patty, I'm not sure. So
Being that I'm scared of heights, I I may not be the one to answer, but I would think once again precautions would be in place. I don't know that he would. I mean, if everything is, I mean, bungee jumping as long as everything's working properly, I would say it would be fairly safe for him. I mean, I don't think that he'd be restricted in the sense of hurting himself.
Yeah.
Out, and plus he would be sidetracked with the actual jump, but
Yeah.
I think it would make him happy, but I think there'd be a little bit of safety issue.
Yep, probably. And listen, when we're talking about doing these things, we're not talking about throwing him out of a plane, though we have charted that on this before. We're talking about him being strapped to somebody else, right? Not just doing it on his own. So yeah, there's some safety measure there. All right, what else we have in the chat? And then I'm going to add one thing before we close.
We have 2. I see a hot air balloon ride, and I see doubles jump, which I'm assuming is what you referred to as a partner bungee jumping.
Yeah, so let's have doubles jump be kind of this bungee jump thing, because I think it would rate about the same. But yeah, I love the suggestion.
And then hot air.
Mm-hmm. And I think hot air balloon is probably similar to airplane. It could be a little more safe than an airplane potentially, but again, same issue. If he gets excited, you can't really quickly remove him from that situation, right? So let's think. I'm going to throw a couple other things out there, but if they've already been mentioned in chat, please just tell me. We've heard before, watch a video about skydiving. Okay, so how's Evan going to feel about that? Well, Evan is not a guy to mince words. Evan's going to say, what the F, essentially. No, I'm not going to do that. He's not going to be very happy with that. But how safe is watching it?
Pretty safe. Be safe with that.
Yeah, pretty safe, right? He's not likely to get hurt with that. So way on the safe side, safer than anything else that we have suggested. All right, the other one that I do here and that we charted when we were doing this for Evan is this. Don't do it. It's that simple, right? That is an option, to just not do it. So how happy is he going to be? I think we can all agree, not happy. But how safe is it to just not do it? And this one's a little trickier, but what do you think, Courtney? How safe would it be to just not do it?
Yeah, when we first did this surprised me, but we had said it would actually be unsafe for him not to do it because he would be unhappy by not getting to bungee jump, and so that would actually be unsafe.
Exactly. So what we find a lot of times is, I mean, think about it for yourself. If you are really hopeful about something, you're really interested in doing something, you have a big goal or a dream, and you are repeatedly told that A, you don't have control over ultimately whether or not it happens, and B, the person who does have control over that says you're not going to do it, well, man, that can really start to affect you. In Evan's case, the more that he is told that he's not going to be able to do these things that he desperately wants to do, and by the way, the rare disorder he has also comes with a shorter life expectancy, well, the more upset he gets. And the more upset that Evan gets, the more likely he is to hurt himself or hurt other people, even though he doesn't intend to. So what seemed like a safe option, even if it didn't make him happy at first, is actually going to make him unhappy and unsafe over time. So anything else in the chat that we didn't get to that you think we should plot on here?
That's all I see in the chat.
Okay, so great. This is just a tool that you can use to help people make decisions. The nice thing about the happy safe grid is it's easy to do. You draw the two lines, you label the top happy, the bottom unhappy, the left side safe, the right side unsafe, and then you just let people talk. And you chart all of this and have a conversation about where they fall. It's a nice visual for people too. Everybody can see that their idea has been captured, right? And then you can say, all right, well, which one of these do we want to go with? I am happy to tell you, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen while I transition back to the last couple slides of our presentation. I'm happy to tell you that I ended up taking another job, but the SSA who followed me for Evan a year later told me that he went indoor skydiving, and we have a video of it. And I'll tell you two things about that video. Number one, yes, he has two people on either side of him, and it's awesome to watch. And he has a huge smile on his face. But guess who else has a huge smile on their face in that video? His dad. And what happened was we were in the one of the last meetings I had with them, and Evan brought up skydiving again. And then Evan had to use the restroom. And so he and his staff went to the restroom. And then his dad and his mom looked at me and they said, you know what, I think we finally get it. Now this had been years, but I think we finally get it. We ride motorcycles. And if someone told us that we were not allowed to ride motorcycles because it is unsafe, we would laugh at them and walk out the door and get on our bikes and ride away. So I think my son just wants to have that experience. And if we try to keep him safe forever, he's going to end up unhappy, right? So this can be different for every person, but it's a great tool to try to use. All right, so listen, ultimately, we want people to know about their options. People with disabilities, parents, educators, service providers, county boards, so many more. This means that we have to start changing the conversation. And there are at least two ways to do this. So first, when the issue of guardianship does come up, make sure you're asking, what is it that we're actually trying to accomplish with guardianship? Because when you ask that question, you can actually find the right approach. But we need to learn about those other less restrictive options as part of this. And we can certainly help with that. We can get into how you actually use these other things, how they work. But another way that you can help change the conversation is by just promoting more self-determination. People having more control over their lives and their decisions for everyone, but especially among younger people. Help them learn and practice decision-making, help them build confidence in their abilities, encourage people to have real life experiences and support them as they learn from them. I don't know about you, but I have learned much more from the mistakes I have made in life than from the things that have gone well, right? And I think that's true for a lot of us. But remember, the more self-determination that a person has, ultimately the better life outcomes they have. So doing these things that we've talked about today really does lead to better lives for people, and we know it. So when we introduce these questions, these perspectives, it can really get people thinking differently. And it ends up being like that Maya Angelou quote, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Well, now we know a little more, we know a little better. And it opens up a lot of positive and even exciting possibilities to explore.
It looks like there's a question out there, Josh.
Okay.
Can you see the chat or do you want me to read it?
I'll find it here. Supported decision-making laws and how close is Ohio to add this to their conversation? Yeah, we can address that really quick. So I'm going to try to make it as basic as possible because we could talk for hours about this. But basically, other I'm glad you mentioned Indiana and Texas. Other states do have supported decision-making laws on their books. In Ohio, we have Superintendent's Rule 66. And it says a lot of things, but it kind of governs guardianship, how it's supposed to work. But a couple of important points from Superintendent's Rule 66 make clear that if there are less restrictive options than guardianship available, we should be using those less restrictive options. That's what it says. That's what the judges are supposed to do. That's what we are supposed to do. If we, as the guardian, realize that maybe it's not necessary for the person anymore, or that they don't need quote unquote full guardianship anymore, maybe they do need a guardian for some decisions, but not all decisions, that we should be approaching the court and saying, hey, judge, my son did need guardianship at first, but now does not need it for as many things. Yes, probably still needs it for medical decisions, but the rest of this stuff, like where he works, he can decide that. There's no point to me doing that, right? And remember, you can use supported decision-making with guardianship. It can be a great tool to go back to a court and say, look at all the things we've been working on. Look at the skills that this person has developed over time. So yes, Superintendent's Rule 66 is what is on the books for us. It is not the same kind of law as other states have, but ours is actually more flexible than other states. Some of them are written so rigidly that it almost becomes restrictive. So the other question is, how do we get this info to doctors that push for guardianship? So yeah, that's part of our project. The thing that Courtney and I are working on, and I'm working on with some other counties in the state, is how to get to doctors and medical professionals with this stuff. So we aren't able to get into it today, but there are actually some really great tools that you can present to doctors. You can work with your son, your daughter, scripts or forms that you can fill out to present to a doctor and say, hey, I want someone to help me make certain decisions. Here's the form that says this. It's legitimate. I need you to respect that. And then there are advocacy organizations that can back you up on that if a doctor needs to just be reminded of the person's rights. Let me scroll up a minute. Let's see. The states that have these laws then make it easier to change guardianship. Hypothetically, yes. Hypothetically, yes. I'll tell you what I have found in Ohio is that every court does things differently. Every judge does things differently. Yes, there is one set of rules for the state, but they are interpreted very differently from county to county. So it's hard to tell you what's actually going to happen in one court versus another court. But yes, some of those laws in other states do hypothetically make it easier to change guardianship. But our rules, that Superintendent's Rule 66, which is certainly worth a read if you're not familiar with it, it allows us to do the same thing. If there are less restrictive options, we are supposed to be going to the court and saying, hey, we should try some of these, and the judge should be supporting that. What do you say about the fear that a young person could be catfished by someone who marries them and parents have no recourse? So there are a couple of things that we can say there. One of them is that guardianship is not going to guarantee that the person remains safe. Neither is supported decision-making. Neither one of those things guarantees that someone is never going to be taken advantage of, right? With that said, if neither one can guarantee, why shouldn't we go with the one that respects their rights more? Because we know from statistics and studies that guardianship does not actually protect the person. Now, can you get a judge to say that the person can't marry if they have a guardian? Sure, you could. So that ends up being more of a person-to-person conversation. Probably not answering your question as fully as you'd like me to, but that's more of a person-to-person sort of consultation. And by the way, we offer that too if you want to go into details. Is guardianship recommended if the person has a history of mental illness, unable to participate when person will not be functional? Would emergency guardianship? That is a great question, and it has come up a lot in our project. So basically, there are other things that you can do for someone, especially who might have a mental illness, if that mental illness doesn't always present itself in, let's say, extreme ways. So remember when we talked about a power of attorney? And when I give this answer, if it's not answering your question, please just let me know it didn't answer it. But a springing power of attorney allows someone else to kind of spring into that decision-making authority for the person under certain circumstances. So if someone has maybe cyclical mental health issues, a springing power of attorney can be written so that when they are kind of in the depth of that and they are really struggling to understand information or make decisions, that the power of attorney goes into effect. And then once they are in a better place, they regain that ability to make their own decisions. Now, that's a little bit tricky because the power of attorney has to specify what that looks like. Like, how do we know when someone is, in a bad place and unable to make those decisions? How do we know when they're now in a better place and can make their own decisions? But it's an option available that does not, essentially permanently remove a person's rights. It's a bit more person-centered than that. So I hope that answers your question. If not, please just let me know and I'll try again. Okay, and you did mention emergency guardianship. Emergency guardianship is certainly a thing. It's a little bit harder to get. It's for pretty extreme situations. But the other thing that you could consider, if maybe you've tried some other things and you're just not sure what else to do, is to petition the court for short-term guardianship. So yes, we do think guardianship is appropriate here, but we don't want to make it indefinite because that can happen with a lot of things, right? Best of intentions, and all of a sudden 10 years later, we're still doing the same things we've done and they didn't need to go on for 10 years. So you can say, court, we want this to be short-term. We want to make sure that we are meeting every 6 months at least, or every year, whatever makes sense for your situation, to give you a progress update. Not just the forms that you have to fill out as the guardian and send into the court, but an actual face-to-face or virtual, if that's what we're doing, to give an update and say, hey, have we made progress? Do we still need full guardianship? Does the person still need help with these kinds of decisions, or has progress been made? So there are just so many options. And again, I know we don't have time to get into everything, but we want you to know that there are many of them out there. Any other questions at the moment? Courtney's got one more slide for us. What happens if a guardian passes? Hold on one second. What happens if a guardian passes and there isn't another person appointed to replace the person? Great question. This has happened to me in my career a few different times. So if the guardian passed, this is what you should know about guardianship. If you are appointed guardian, you're actually appointed a representative of the court. The court is the superior guardian. So if the court doesn't like the decisions that you're making for a person, they can remove you. They can override your decisions because the court is the superior guardian. What that means when a person passes away is the court is the guardian in the interim. Now, in my experience, and I certainly won't speak for every court, just in my experience, when that happens, it's really hard to get a court to make decisions or give consent for things for a person because they've got so much going on. So technically the court is a guardian, but are they the active guardian? No, just kind of by name, and legally they're the guardian, but they're not actually interacting or making decisions for the person. So until someone else can be appointed, yeah, it's really hard to get decisions made for the person. Now, you can say, I'd like a successor guardian. This is the person we think should be the guardian. If something happens to me, you can do that. There's still a process that the court will have to go through to appoint that person as well. Is there a difference that a healthcare POA hospital would not take advice, thoughts, or decisions making medication with healthcare POA? They required guardianship. I'm glad you brought that up too. In those cases, the hospital just needs to be educated. It's that simple. Hospitals are often concerned about liability, as are many organizations, right, who try to help people, but they just need to be educated. And that's a tough position for a parent to be in, because do you feel like you have the authority to really challenge the doctor, right? They have all this specialized knowledge. What do we have? So we can help you get what you need to take it to the medical professionals. Disability Rights Ohio, another organization I've actually been in contact with, they said they are perfectly willing, if you find yourself in that situation, to talk to the doctor and remind them or explain to them the rights of the person with a disability, or if there's a POA in effect, what that POA actually means and what the medical professional's responsibility is to honor that POA. So it's not an easy answer. It's not a quick answer, not something you can just tell the doctor that changes their mind, but there is a process, and we can equip you with resources and tools that you can take to doctors to start that conversation, because we know that in addition to parents, right, schools, medical professionals need to have this information, because they can simply sign an expert evaluation and send it into the court And once the court has a piece of paper saying, yep, I think this person needs a guardian, and it comes from a doctor, they may not really evaluate it any further, right? So great questions. Thank you very much. Courtney, I'm going to let you do this last slide, and if any other questions pop up, we can address them after that.
Okay. So that's it, a lot of information, but we want to emphasize again how much we appreciate your time and attention on this. Your disposition about this issue can really impact the success, which is ultimately about helping people live better lives. What we typically like to do is give you all some time to digest this, and then you're welcome to reach out to us after that for any reason. If you want to talk through a situation, if you want to learn more about tools that are available, or if you'd like us to help you explore less restrictive options. And then once you got some practice using supported decision-making, share your real-life stories like mine, because that's what really helps us get traction and gain momentum. Don't hesitate to reach out or ask for help when you need it, to consider as your lifeline on this topic. We'll be more than happy to help. With that, are there any questions, comments, or even concerns?
Courtney, I'm going to go right back to the chat. Does a power of attorney just need to be notarized, or does it have to be filed with the court? Typically, it just needs to be notarized. It's that simple. Now, depending on the nature of the power of attorney, what you're using it for, it can be very, very helpful. And I would definitely recommend talking to an attorney so that it is worded correctly. But no, it doesn't have to be filed with the court. Do we present to young people? Yes, we do, right, Courtney? We do present to young people and self-advocates of all ages. So we have lots of different presentations we give to different audiences, because we know that each audience has kind of a different priority. And so we try to meet them where they are. Not filed with court. Yep, somebody answered that. There's a link to Disability Rights Ohio. Thank you for that. Get it to all healthcare providers if a healthcare POA. Yes, if you do have a POA for healthcare, make sure that the healthcare providers have it. Get the bank if it's financial POA. Great. Thank you, Angela, for your contributions there. You're right. Make sure that if you do sign a POA, that you get it in the hands of people or organizations with whom you're going to exercise it. Oh, she just did it. Great. Angela, do you have anything else that you want to share for people about the POA, either how it's worked or challenges or any other suggestions for people? I don't mean to put you on the spot either, so if not, that's fine. Yes, you probably need several copies of the POA. I would keep the original and then make sure that you get copies. That's okay, Angela. If you want to put anything in the chat, I'll read it for everybody so it's on the recording as well.
I'll see if I can unmute you, Angela. See if it lets me.
Yep, she says everyone has made copies of the POAs for themselves.
I unmuted you. You might be able to speak now, Angela. Maybe not. Okay.
Well, I think to Angela's point, just starting that conversation with those people. Yeah, sorry, Angela, we can't hear you. Again, if you put anything in the chat, I'll be glad to read it out loud. But just starting the conversation with the people you come in contact with, the professionals you come in contact with, it will help them learn. You know, the question earlier about how do we get this information to medical professionals? That's one of the ways. Start with a POA, a simple POA for maybe healthcare for your son or daughter after they turn 18, and present it to your doctor, your doctor's office, the nurses, the receptionists, and start having a conversation about it with them. All of a sudden, now they have experience with it, real life experience with it. Had heard about this from Cincy Children's. Yep. And talked with a lawyer about guardianship versus POA. Yep. Can doctors refuse the POA, sue? They shouldn't. I'm sure there is some loophole that says that they can, especially if they don't think that the POA was signed by someone who had the capacity to sign it. So remember when I was talking about POA, the person has to understand what they're doing when they sign over authority. If this is, for example, you can't And I'm going to use kind of a silly example, but if someone is in a coma, you can't put a pen in their hand and have them sign the POA because they're not aware of what's going on, right? That's not a legitimate POA at that point. So as long as they understand what they're doing, then the POA should be legitimate. But sometimes doctors will say that they don't think it is legitimate. And then that can make its way to probate court.
Josh, you had mentioned a couple things, scripts or forms that people can use when going to, talk to the doctor or whatever. Is there a link or somewhere where the parents or we could pull that from, or?
Yep, give me a second here because we haven't added this to our presentations, but I'm going to go ahead and show it so all of you can access it. And yes, Patty, I will send out links and other resources that you can share, but I want you to see this because this is something that you can do right now if you want to. So if you go to our site, OhioNetworkForInnovation.com, under services and resources, we have uploaded a bunch of supported decision-making resources. Each one of these thumbnails is a different resource that you can consult, that you can use with your loved one. And I'm trying to find the one that I was referring to. It might not be uploaded yet, but we will get it on there. It might be this. Give me a second, it might be this. If it's not, I'll just make sure I send it to you. Bear with me while I scroll. There you go. So I love this one, especially for, so I am autistic and I actually use scripts all the time. My PowerPoint is completely scripted. So even if it sounds like I'm being conversational, it's scripted. But this is a worksheet that walks people through how to have a conversation with their doctor. So this can help people kind of rehearse. So it says, making an appointment. I don't know if it's big enough for you to read, but making an appointment is usually done by telephone, in person, or if available through a secure electronic messaging system, et cetera, et cetera. And then they prompt the person to go through and document what they need to know. What's the telephone number you need to call? How else can you get a hold of them? What's the name of the provider? And then as you go, here's your script for making an appointment. Hello, my name is, and I'm calling to make an appointment with, and it walks you through it. Here's the reason. And so each time, you can work on making a script, and that they can practice this, right? Practice makes perfect. We all make mistakes, but if they don't have the opportunity to practice, they're never going to develop the skill. So there are just myriad tools like this that I can certainly share with you in a variety of fashions. You can go to our website and look at what's uploaded. Other things we've done is we've actually done family night presentations, a series of them, where we kind of go through different tools and we get more in depth as we go. If that's something you're just in, let us know. We can do that for you too. But yes, this is an example of one of the scripts and forms that you can use to help people practice working with their doctors.
And you mentioned the rule, the 66.
Yep.
Is there a link to that? We had a presentation last night for those who attended. They mentioned the rule 66, but I didn't know if you had a link to share with those attending tonight.
Yep, I will put it in the chat. Just a second. I don't know if that chat is going to come through as a link. Yep, it did. So that is the PDF of Rule 66. You are welcome to refer to it. Let me find very quickly. So I usually do less restrictive. I'm just going with restrictive. All right, so again, I don't know if you can see this, but under D, limitation or termination of guardianship, this is mostly what I was referring to. A guardian shall seek to limit or terminate the guardianship authority and promptly notify probate court if any of the following occurs. 1, the ward's ability to make decisions and function independently has improved. So it doesn't mean that they can now do everything by themselves, but it has improved. 2, less restrictive alternatives are available. Well, guess what? For many of you, you might not have known of some of these less restrictive alternatives that are currently available. And you just learned about them tonight. I don't know if you can hear my dog scratching right next to me on the chair, but if you can, that's what's going on. I apologize. A plenary guardianship, which is guardianship of person and estate or the finances, is no longer in their best interest, or if the ward has died. So there are other things in here that are very relevant and important and great to explore, but it's this section D that has the most relevance to supported decision-making and other less restrictive options.
Wonderful. Thank you for all that information. That's very helpful.
Thank you. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Again,
thank
reach
you.
out if you have any other questions. Courtney's available. I think we had her contact information on the last slide. I'm available. So any questions, concerns, or if you just want consultation or to follow up on anything else, we are here for you.
Can you put your your contact information either in the chat box or that last slide back up for those who may not?
I'll bring up the last
have-
slide real quickly.
So as Josh is pulling up that last slide, again, if you think of a question, just like last night, for those who attended last night, if you think of a question after this presentation, whether tonight or from last night or anything, you can email me or email them directly. But if you email me, I'll forward it to the appropriate parties, depending on what your question is. And so there's their information. If you want to copy it down, that would be even for future reference, I would copy it down. This presentation is uploaded to our Google Salt Drive. I am recording it, so it will be also available in that we usually record it to YouTube. Is there a link to the recorded sessions? Yes, there. It will be. It takes me a day or two to get everything transferred, but we will have a YouTube link available, and it's also will be uploaded not only to the Salt Google Drive, but to our live binder that we have, which there's the links in the chat box. I do want to mention some upcoming events then in a minute here, but I'm going to close our recording. But I do want to thank Courtney and Josh for all the great information you shared. It is so helpful to hear all the variety, the different perspectives and the different ideas all around this, so that we don't think there's only one way, so that we have our options and we can weigh our decisions, based on the knowledge that we gain through the transition. So 1 second, White. But again, thank you both. Thank you all for coming. And just a reminder, there will be a survey that pops up when you sign out.